July 1917, the trenches of Ypres in Belgium. A heavy yellow fog rolls across the mud. It smells, strangely, of garlic, which is rarely a promising development on a battlefield. But as it touches the skin, it blisters. As it enters the lungs, it burns agonizingly. Panic spreads along the line. The cry goes up, "Gas! Gas! Gas!" Soon this terrifying substance would become known as mustard gas, because of its colour, its smell, and its capacity to burn. But the problem with that name is that the gas isn't mustard. It contains absolutely no mustard at all. At first glance, therefore, the nickname may seem a bit unfair on the real stuff, until you realise what a biological aggressor real mustard is. A plant that evolved a binary defense system to stop mammals from eating it. To experience it, you don't need a gas mask, you need a frankfurter. This is the real violent history of the badass yellow paste in your fridge. So why does a hot dog topping share its name with a war crime? Let's take a look at the plant itself. It's a member of the brassica family, which makes it the angry cousin of the cabbage. While a cabbage will meekly yield to being boiled into a mush, the mustard seed is a paranoid survivalist. It's built a chemical landmine into its own biology. But here's the clever part. The little yellow psychopath isn't actually poisonous. If you swallow a mustard seed whole, it's about as dangerous as a decorative cushion. The whole mustard seed is safe because the weapon is stored in pieces. Inside the seed there are two separate chambers. Chamber A holds the fuel, a compound called sinigrin. Chamber B holds the detonator, an enzyme called myrosinase. As long as the cell wall stands between them, the weapon is safe to handle. But the moment you bite down, crunch, the wall breaks. The detonator hits the fuel, and instantly, we're talking milliseconds here, a chemical reaction explodes in your mouth. It creates a volatile gas called allyl isothiocyanate. This sounds like a mouthful, but it isn't a flavour. It's an assault. Whereas chilies trick your tongue into feeling heat, mustard is more ambitious. It vaporizes and attacks receptors in your nose, the same tripwire your body uses to detect tear gas and cigarette smoke. So when the sharp, stinging sensation shoots up your sinuses, you aren't tasting zest. You're reacting to a biological booby trap going off in your face. Of course, instead of spitting it out, we decided to bottle it. But long before we put it on a burger, the ancients revered mustard's ferocity, and their name for it sounds particularly to the point. The Romans actively encouraged mustard's aggression. They called it burning wine. In Latin, that's mustum ardens. They made it by taking the unfermented juice of crushed grapes, the juice known as must, and then throwing in these tiny green grenades and crushing them. The acid in the grape juice traps the explosive chemical reaction. In a brilliant example of chemical engineering, the Romans created a weapon in a jar. Around 2,000 years ago, a famous Roman cookbook was written. It's called De Re Coquinaria, written by a chef called Marcus Gavius Apicius. Apicius wasn't interested in blandness. He wanted a sauce that punched you in the face. Fine dining, Roman style. He mixed spices, vinegar, broth, oil, and crushed mustard seeds, and spread the resulting stinging liquid over roasted wild boar. Why, you might ask, would the Romans take a delicious roast and deliberately make it painful to eat? Well, when you spend your days conquering the known world in a metal skirt, an anemic salad simply won't do. And that's how the wild weed was tamed. We decided there's nothing like a little physical abuse to make mealtimes more interesting. So we took this vindictive relative of the Brussels sprout and farmed it, spreading its painful little seeds across Europe. But its journey to modern street food wasn't peaceful. It got heavily involved in medieval politics, and eventually it caught the attention of the Pope. In the Middle Ages, entire social structures depended on mustard. The story is told that King Philip VI of France and the Duke of Burgundy fought the Great Mustard War of 1336 over supply lines. Amusing though it would be to imagine a 14th century condiment conflict, it's a complete myth. Disappointingly, history reveals there wasn't an armed conflict at all. It was in fact a massive dinner party in the town of Rouvres. The Duke's guests consumed an entire poinçon of the stuff. That's a huge wooden cask filled with spicy yellow sludge. They didn't fight over it, they just showed off their wealth by eating barrel loads of pain. The 14th century Pope, John XXII, allegedly loved the sinus-clearing paste so much that he created a senior role in Avignon where the papacy resided at the time. According to legend, he appointed his idle nephew, a man with, by all accounts, no discernible skills, as the Grand Moutardier du Pape. That means the Pope's Grand Mustard Maker. He created a high-ranking church office specifically to manage his spicy dips. It's like appointing a relative as Secretary of State for ketchup. This absurdity spawned a brilliant French expression. If someone has a massive ego, the French say he thinks he's the Pope's mustard maker. By the time we reached the Renaissance, the paste was a standard for insults. William Shakespeare used it to call people stupid. In Henry IV Part II, Falstaff insults a man named Poins by saying his wit's as thick as Tewkesbury mustard. Tewkesbury mustard was made by mixing crushed mustard seeds with fiery horseradish root and forming them into solid balls. Calling someone as thick as Tewkesbury mustard meant they were dense and intensely irritating. I know a few folk like that. But the plant wasn't just a punchline for playwrights. 300 years later, people thought that if mustard hurt the mouth, it must surely cure the body, and that the best way to test that theory was on helpless Victorian children. In the 19th century, medical science involved a lot of aggressive guesswork. Victorian doctors took a plant that actively fought back when chewed and decided the logical next step must of course be to strap it to a sick child. They invented the mustard plaster. This wasn't a soothing herbal remedy. Ground mustard seeds were mixed with wheat flour and warm water. This appetizing paste was spread onto a cloth and slapped directly onto a patient's chest. And the scientific basis for this? It relied on a brutal medical theory called counter-irritation. If a child had a deep chest infection, you created a new burning pain on their skin. The nervous system supposedly gets distracted by the searing chemical fire on the outside and forgets about the illness on the inside. They were fighting a cough with a localized arson attack. A medical manual from the 1800s gave strict instructions on how to prepare the paste, and crucially, it warned parents not to leave it on for longer than an hour. Why? Because a massive blister was highly likely to follow. Modern medical papers confirm this practice routinely caused second-degree burns. Generations of children were pinned down and subjected to this hideous treatment. It was a bizarre home torture that was to lead to mustard lending its name to one of the cruelest methods of warfare in history. Let's jump back into the muddy trenches of Ypres in 1917. The soldiers choking on that heavy yellow fog were experiencing a horrifying chemical reality. But mustard gas has no connection whatsoever to the plant. It's a man-made, skin-melting chemical, properly known as sulfur mustard. Chemically speaking, it's a weapon that destroys DNA, not a natural defense trick. It forces your cells to self-destruct in a horrific, agonizing panic. So why did British troops name a weapon of mass destruction after a sandwich spread? Well, the impure synthetic gas happened to smell faintly of garlic and horseradish. Those plants share similar sulfur compounds with our angry little seed. With dark irony, the soldiers associated the blistering, burning sensation of the gas with mustard. The food's reputation for inflicting pain and suffering was already firmly established. A bit of a public relations disaster for an ingredient, if you ask me. But the plant hadn't finished evolving its public image, because after the horrors of the trenches, it was given a curious modern makeover. We stripped away its dignity, painted it neon yellow, and sold it to the masses. In 1904, the St. Louis World's Fair introduced the masses to the hot dog. Alongside it, they launched a bright yellow cream salad paste. This version of mustard is a cheerful, squeezable topping, but the neon color is a complete lie. Mustard seeds aren't naturally bright yellow. Makers pump the mixture full of turmeric to give it that cheerful, radioactive glow. More importantly, they drown the crushed seeds in vinegar. When you flood the chemical reaction with an acid like vinegar, it controls the heat. It contains the violence, like putting a muzzle on a bitey dog. It stops the burning gas from destroying your nose. The wild, stinging weed has been turned into a tame, sour paste. But people can't just leave things alone. We had to inject class warfare into the mix. Enter Dijon mustard. In 1981, a television advert featured two Rolls-Royces pulling up alongside each other. One wealthy man politely asks the other for a jar of grey poupon. Suddenly, this aggressive little seed became a symbol of wealth and high class. Clever marketing, and, like so much corporate marketing, utter hogwash. A 1937 French law had declared that Dijon is merely a generic style. Calling it Dijon mustard doesn't mean it ever came anywhere close to the city of Dijon. The difference? The posh stuff simply uses unripe grape juice instead of ordinary vinegar. It's the same biological hand grenade, it's just charging you double for the French accent.
Oh, sacré bleu!
This angry little weed developed a chemical dynamite to defend itself from hungry mammals. Humanity responded by naming a horrific weapon after it and dyeing it neon yellow to squirt it on our hot dogs. The mustard plant evolved to be left alone. But evolution is no match for human perversity. We took a plant that was trying to punch us in the face and slapped it on a ham sandwich.